The cafeteria of Westbridge Middle School had always felt different. Not because of its peeling paint or the smell of boiled vegetables that seemed to cling to the walls, but because of the silence. Even when packed with dozens of chattering children, a strange heaviness always lingered in the air, like the echo of something long gone. It was the kind of silence that made you lower your voice without knowing why. The kind of silence that made students glance at the lunch line with unease and at the woman who ran it. Her name was Mrs. Halloway, but nobody dared call her that. To the children, she was simply the lunch lady. She was tall, with wiry gray hair pulled back under a net that never seemed clean. Her skin was pale, stretched too tightly over her bones, with hands that trembled slightly as she ladled food onto trays. But her eyes were the kind that made you stop mid-sentence. Cold, searching, hungry. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her voice was a rasp, like something dragged from the back of her throat. At first, new students thought the fear was just a childish rumor. But by the end of their first year, most of them had their own story to tell. Some swore they had seen her staring at them from the kitchen window long after lunch was over. Others said she whispered things when she handed you your food, things you weren't meant to hear. A few swore the food itself wasn't right. One boy described biting into a piece of meat and finding something sharp lodged inside, like a sliver of bone. Another girl swore the mashed potatoes moved on her tray, as if something beneath the surface writhed before settling again. The teachers dismissed it all as imagination. Children being children, they said. But the children knew better. It was the autumn of 1998 when things began to escalate. Leaves piled in the gutters, the sky turned gray, and the air smelled faintly of rain and rust. And that's when the whispers about the lunch lady changed from silly cafeteria gossip into something much darker. A group of 8th graders, 3 boys and a girl, decided to test the rumors. Their names were Tommy, Aaron, Ben, and Claire. They weren't friends exactly, but they shared the same gnawing curiosity. What went on behind the kitchen door after the lunch bell rang? Tommy was the ringleader, loud, brash, and always looking for trouble. Aaron was quieter but clever, often the one with a plan. Ben was nervous, jittery, always on edge. And Claire was different. She didn't laugh at the stories. She didn't call the lunch lady a freak. She just watched. And sometimes, it looked like she understood something the others didn't. It started with the smell. Every afternoon, long after the kitchen should have been cleaned, a foul stench seeped into the hallways. It wasn't just spoiled food. It was metallic, bitter, like blood baked onto iron. The janitor complained once, saying the garbage was never taken out on time. But the next day, the smell was worse. Then he stopped complaining. And then, he stopped coming to work altogether. No one ever explained why. One afternoon, after the last bell, Tommy convinced the others to stay behind. They hid in the empty cafeteria, crouching behind the long metal tables, listening. For a long time, there was nothing, just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft tick of the clock. And then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing against the tiles. The kitchen door creaked open. Through the crack, they saw her, Mrs. Halloway, dragging something across the floor. Something wrapped in thick black plastic, leaving a wet trail in its wake. She didn't struggle, though whatever she dragged was heavy. Her movements were practiced, steady. She pulled it into the kitchen, shut the door, and the lock clicked. The children sat frozen, their breath shallow. Ben whispered, "What was that?" No one answered. The next morning, one of the 8th graders, Claire, noticed something. The lunch lady wasn't wearing her usual stained apron. Instead, she had on a fresh one. White, crisp, as if she were expecting company. And when Claire stepped up in line, tray trembling in her hands, Mrs. Halloway leaned close. Her lips barely moved, but Claire swore she heard the whisper, "Don't come back." That week, 3 students went missing. All 8th graders. 2 boys and 1 girl. Police combed the town, questioning neighbors, scouring parks, interviewing classmates. But the bodies were never found. And every day, at exactly noon, the cafeteria filled with the same smell again. Stronger now. Sweet, sickly, rotten. By October, the cafeteria was half empty. Parents packed lunches for their children, some kept them home altogether. But the school board refused to close the cafeteria. Unrelated, they said. Coincidence. But the children whispered among themselves. And more than a few of them swore. The lunch lady's portions had grown larger. As if she was feeding them more. much more. One afternoon, Claire stayed behind again. She couldn't help herself. Something inside her demanded to know the truth. And as the last of the students left the cafeteria, she lingered in the shadows, her heart racing. She watched as Mrs. Halloway wheeled out a cart from the back. On it sat several metal trays, covered with lids. Steam curled from underneath, carrying that smell, the smell that haunted her dreams. The lunch lady placed the trays into the warmer, humming softly to herself. A low, tuneless sound, almost like a lullaby. And then she stopped. She lifted her head. Her eyes moved slowly across the empty cafeteria, until they landed on the corner where Claire hid. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. And then, the lunch lady smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a human smile. A smile stretched too wide, too wrong. That night, Claire dreamed of the cafeteria, of the smell, of the whisper in her ear. And when she woke, her pillow was damp with blood. The dream clung to Claire like a second skin. She could still hear the humming when she opened her eyes, still taste the copper on her tongue. But when she checked her face in the bathroom mirror the next morning, there was nothing. No blood, no cut, no proof. Just pale skin and trembling hands. She told no one. Not Tommy, not Aaron, not even Ben. Because something told her that speaking about it would make it real. The cafeteria was quieter than usual that day. The missing students had become headlines, their faces stapled to telephone poles and grocery store bulletin boards. Parents hovered at the edge of the cafeteria, watching their children eat, as if the lunch lady herself might lunge from behind the counter and snatch them away. But she didn't. She stood there, silent as ever, her ladle moving in steady arcs. Slop on tray. Slop on tray. Her gaze never faltering. When it was Claire's turn in line, she kept her eyes down. But she felt the woman lean forward, felt her breath against her ear. This time, there was no whisper, only silence. But that silence was worse than words. That afternoon, Tommy slammed his fist against the lunch table. We can't just sit here. We saw her drag something. We all saw it. And now those kids are gone. Aaron adjusted his glasses, trying to sound logical though his voice shook. We don't know it was her. It could have been garbage. It could have been anything. Garbage doesn't leave a blood trail, Tommy snapped. Ben muttered something under his breath. None of them caught it. The plan formed quickly. They would break into the kitchen after hours. Just once. Just to see. Tommy said they owed it to the kids who were missing. Aaron said they owed it to themselves. And Claire, she said nothing. But when Tommy looked at her with that wild grin, she nodded anyway. The school at night was a different place. The halls stretched longer, darker, as if the building itself had grown while the children were gone. Every door was locked. Every shadow stretched unnaturally. The cafeteria was worse. It looked abandoned, tables stacked, chairs folded, only the faint buzz of lights above. And then there was the smell. Thicker, stronger, so heavy it clung to their throats, making them gag as they stepped closer to the kitchen door. The lock glinted in the half-light. A heavy brass padlock. Figures, Tommy muttered. He pulled a small crowbar from his backpack. Good thing I came prepared. Ben's eyes widened. Are you crazy? That's breaking in. If we get caught, no one's catching us. Tommy interrupted. Not tonight. He jammed the crowbar into the lock. Metal screeched against metal. And then, a click. The lock fell away. The kitchen was colder than the rest of the school. Colder, darker, wrong. Rows of steel counters glimmered faintly under the emergency light. Pots hung from hooks above, swaying gently though no air stirred. And the smell. God, the smell. It was strongest here, pooling in the corners, seeping from behind the heavy freezer door. Aaron gagged into his sleeve. Jesus Christ, what is that? Tommy stepped forward, his bravado faltering. He reached for the freezer handle. But Claire grabbed his arm. Her voice cracked. Don't. For a moment, the group froze. The air was too still, too quiet, except for a sound they hadn't noticed before, a faint dripping, somewhere deeper inside. Drip, drip, drip. Maybe it's just a leak, Aaron whispered. But Claire shook her head. Her stomach churned. She knew that sound. It wasn't water. They followed the sound. Past the freezer. Past the ovens. Into the back corner of the kitchen where a single door stood ajar. It wasn't like the others. Smaller. Narrower. And from inside came the steady drip. Tommy swallowed hard. This is it. He pushed the door open. The room beyond was little more than a storage closet. But the smell was unbearable, a choking sweetness that made their eyes water. And on the floor, buckets. Metal buckets filled to the brim with thick, dark liquid. Ben stumbled back, his hand over his mouth. Is that blood? None of them answered. Because they knew. The drip came from the ceiling, where a rusty pipe leaked. Not water. Not grease. Blood. It slid down in steady drops, adding to the buckets below. Claire's stomach lurched. Her knees went weak. She turned to leave, and that's when she saw it. Scratched into the inside of the doorframe, in deep, jagged letters. Don't look in the freezer. Her throat closed. She grabbed Tommy's arm, pointing to the words. For the first time, even Tommy looked afraid. The sound came then. A faint humming. Low, tuneless. The same sound Claire had heard when the lunch lady wheeled her cart. It was coming from the cafeteria. She's here, Aaron hissed. The children froze, eyes wide. The humming grew louder, closer, the sound of soft footsteps on tile. Claire's heart hammered in her chest. They were trapped. And then, the freezer door creaked open. They didn't see inside, but they saw her shadow stretch across the kitchen floor. And they knew. She wasn't humming to herself. She was humming to whatever was in the freezer. The children held their breath. The humming filled the kitchen, spilling in through the door like smoke, curling around them, tightening their chests until it felt impossible to breathe. The freezer door moaned wider. Cold air rolled out, carrying a scent that made Claire's stomach clench, raw iron, rot, and something far worse. They could see only glimpses through the crack in the door. A tray. Something pale on it. Something shaped like. Ben whimpered. Tommy clamped a hand over his mouth, eyes wild. The humming grew softer now, like a lullaby sung to a sleeping child. The freezer shut with a heavy clunk. And then, silence. No footsteps. No breath. No sign that she'd left. Aaron mouthed, "What do we do?" Tommy pointed toward the closet where they'd found the buckets. His eyes screamed, "Hide." They crouched in the dark, pressed shoulder to shoulder, the stink of blood coating their throats. Every sound was amplified. Their shallow breaths, the faint rustle of clothes, the steady drip, drip, drip from the pipe above. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, the sound of footsteps again. Slow, deliberate. She was moving around the kitchen, checking, searching. A ladle clanged against metal. Pots rattled. The humming returned, fainter now, as if she were walking toward the cafeteria again. And then, the slam of the kitchen door. Silence. Tommy was the first to move. "She's gone," he hissed, voice shaking with relief. "We gotta see what's in there." Aaron stared at him, horrified. "Are you insane? Did you not read the door? Don't look in the freezer. It was carved there for a reason." "That's exactly why we have to look," Tommy shot back. "Someone wanted to warn us. Which means there's something in there worth seeing." Ben shook his head violently, tears streaking his face. No, I'm not doing it. We need to go. We need to tell somebody." But Tommy wasn't listening. He was already standing, already reaching for the freezer handle. Claire's voice cracked. "Tommy, don't." He looked back at her, grinning in that reckless way of his. "Don't you want to know?" The freezer door groaned open. Cold air blasted into the room, frosting the edges of the steel. The stench hit them instantly, rot and meat, sour and thick. Inside, stacked on trays and shelves, were pieces. Not whole bodies. Not clean cuts. Pieces. Arms, legs, torsos. Skin pale and bluish, hair matted with frost. Eyes staring, frozen wide in silent screams. Some trays held smaller shapes. Too small. Claire's vision blurred. Her knees buckled. Aaron gagged, retching into his sleeve. Ben collapsed against the wall, sobbing silently. And Tommy just stood there, face drained of color, his breath fogging in the icy air. But then, something moved. On the middle shelf, beneath the pale heap of limbs, something twitched. A hand, blackened, shriveled, but moving. Its fingers curled, scraping against the steel. Then another hand, another twitch. And from beneath the pile, a face emerged. Not whole, half-rotted, skin sagging. But its eyes opened, clouded white, locked on the children. And it whispered, not with breath, not with sound, but with something deeper. Something that crawled into their skulls. "Hungry," Claire screamed. The others bolted. Tommy slammed the freezer door shut, his face white with terror. "Run," he gasped. They didn't need telling twice. They tore through the kitchen, past the buckets, past the dangling pots. Their shoes squeaked against tile, their hearts pounding louder than footsteps. But as they reached the cafeteria doors, the humming started again. Right behind them, they burst into the hallway, the sound following. Tommy yanked the door shut and jammed the crowbar through the handles. The metal rattled as something heavy pressed from the other side. The humming grew louder. Closer. The children ran, not looking back. That night, Claire lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The images seared into her mind. The freezer, the bodies, the moving hand. That face. And the whisper that hadn't left her head since. Hungry. She pressed her palms against her ears, trying to block it out. But the word came anyway, low and insistent. When she finally drifted into sleep, her dreams were filled with tables lined with trays. And every tray held pieces of her friends. The next morning, news spread fast. Tommy wasn't at school. Neither was Ben. Teachers muttered about illness, parents about truancy. But Claire and Aaron knew. They exchanged a look across the classroom. They knew. Because when they entered the cafeteria at noon, the lunch lady was waiting. And she was smiling. A wide, unnatural smile. On her apron were 2 fresh stains. Dark. Wet. Still glistening. The cafeteria was louder than usual, filled with nervous chatter. But to Claire and Aaron, every sound seemed distant, muffled beneath the pounding of their hearts. They couldn't stop staring at the lunch lady. She stood at the front of the line, ladle in hand, moving in that same steady rhythm. Slop on a trays. Slop on a trays. Her stained apron swayed as she turned, and the fresh marks stood out like wounds against her pale clothing. Aaron leaned close to Claire, whispering through clenched teeth. She knows. Claire didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on the dark spots spreading slowly across the fabric, like the apron itself was bleeding. And then, as if sensing their gaze, the lunch lady looked up. Her eyes found Claire's, found Aaron's, and she smiled. The rest of the day was a blur. Neither spoke. Neither could eat. They waited for Tommy and Ben to appear to prove their fears wrong. But the seats at the back of the class stayed empty. By dismissal, the rumors had already begun. Tommy's parents hadn't seen him since yesterday. Ben's bed was empty that morning, covers neatly folded, window left unlocked. The police were called again. Questions were asked. But no one thought to question the cafeteria. No one, except Claire and Aaron. That evening, Aaron showed up at Claire's house. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "We have to finish this," he said. "We can't just pretend it didn't happen. Tommy and Ben, they're gone. And we're next." Claire's throat tightened. "What are you saying?" "We go back. Tonight. We burn it down if we have to." The thought chilled her. The school, the cafeteria, the freezer, all of it going up in flames. But deep down, she knew Aaron was right. If they didn't stop her, no one would. The school was darker that night, as if it were holding its breath. Clouds smothered the moon, leaving the hallways in shadow. Claire and Aaron slipped inside through a broken window, flashlights cutting through the dark. They moved fast, hearts pounding, every creak of the floorboards echoing too loudly. The cafeteria loomed ahead like a cavern, silent, waiting. And then they saw it. The kitchen door. Unlocked. Inside, the kitchen was different. Cleaner. As if someone had scrubbed every surface until it gleamed. The buckets were gone. The pipe no longer dripped. Even the stench seemed weaker. But the freezer door still stood there. Heavy. Cold. Waiting. Aaron's hand shook as he raised the flashlight. "We do this fast." Claire nodded, though every nerve screamed to run. The freezer groaned open, and what they saw inside would never leave them. The trays were full again. But these weren't pale, frozen strangers. They were fresh. Tommy's jacket, torn and stiff with blood, hung from one of the trays. Ben's sneakers dangled from another shelf, laces dragging in the frost. And on the lowest tray, a face stared back at them through the ice. Ben's face, eyes open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Claire collapsed, her cry muffled by Aaron's hand over her mouth. "Chill. Don't," he hissed, tears streaming down his cheeks. But it was too late. The humming had started again. From the far side of the kitchen, the sound of footsteps echoed. Slow. Heavy. Patient. Aaron slammed the freezer door shut, fumbling for the crowbar. "We have to go now." They bolted, shoes squealing on the tile, hearts thundering in their ears. The kitchen door loomed ahead, but before they reached it, it slammed shut. On its own, the humming grew louder. Claire spun, flashlight beam trembling, sweeping across the counters, the walls, the pots that swayed gently above. And then she saw her. The lunch lady stood in the corner, her shadow spilling across the walls, stretching too long, too wrong. Her hands twitched at her sides, fingers curling and uncurling, nails black with something crusted beneath them. Her mouth opened, and this time she spoke. "You shouldn't have looked." The flashlight flickered. In that stuttering light, her body seemed to shift, her frame too long, her limbs jerking as if pulled by strings. Her face sagged, skin melting in places before tightening again. Aaron grabbed Claire's hand, dragging her toward the back of the kitchen. They shoved through swinging doors, stumbling into a hallway lined with storage rooms. The humming followed. Closer. Louder. Every door they passed rattled violently, as if unseen hands clawed from inside. They reached the end of the hall, a dead end. Aaron cursed under his breath, spinning in circles. There's no way out, and then they both saw it. A door. Half-hidden, narrow, just like the one that had held the buckets. They didn't hesitate. They shoved it open and slipped inside. It was another storage room, but smaller, darker. The air was damp, heavy with mildew. Claire pressed her back against the door, trying to quiet her breathing. Aaron fumbled with the crowbar, wedging it against the frame. Outside, the humming filled the hallway, moving slowly past. Then it stopped, right outside the door. The handle twitched. Once, twice, and then it turned. The crowbar groaned under the strain. The metal bent slightly, the wood around it splintering. Claire clutched Aaron's arm, tears streaming silently. And then, suddenly, silence. The footsteps moved away. The humming faded. For now, inside the darkness, their flashlights revealed something carved into the wall. Deep gouges, words etched in uneven lines. Aaron leaned close, his voice trembling as he read aloud. "We are the food." Claire's blood ran cold. She turned slowly, her flashlight sweeping the far corner of the room. And that's when she saw them. Dozens of faces staring back from the dark. Children's faces. But not alive. Not whole. Masks. Stitched together from skin. Hung carefully on hooks. And in the center of them all, a fresh one. Ben's. Claire's scream never left her throat. It stayed trapped there, strangled by the sight of Ben's face. Hollowed, lifeless, stretched taut like parchment across wire hooks. His empty eyes watched her from the wall, along with dozens of others. Some she recognized, some she didn't. Faces of children long gone, preserved like trophies. Aaron staggered backward, clutching his mouth, as if he could hold his sanity inside. Oh God, she keeps them. Claire couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every mask seemed to lean toward her, silently begging her not to join them. Then the humming started again. Low, slow, a lullaby just beyond the door. The crowbar groaned as the handle twisted, splinters showering to the floor. Aaron snapped from his shock, grabbing Claire's arm. "We have to run. Now." The door shuddered. The wood cracked. And then, silence. They both froze. The humming had stopped. A moment later, the door swung open on its own. The crowbar clattered to the ground. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No shadow. Only silence. Aaron swallowed hard. "She's playing with us." Claire nodded, every muscle trembling. "Then we don't give her time. We end it now." They crept through the hall, flashlights shaking. Every door they passed seemed to breathe, as though the walls themselves were alive. When they reached the kitchen again, the freezer stood wide open. Frost bled across the tile. Inside, the trays were empty. Every piece, every limb, gone. Aaron's voice cracked. "Where are they?" The humming answered. Behind them. The lunch lady stepped into the kitchen, taller than before, her frame stretching like a shadow cast by flame. Her apron hung in tatters, wet and glistening. Her face sagged, melting in places, then snapped back into something grotesquely human. In her hands, she carried a tray. On it, 2 plates. Each one steaming. Each one waiting. She placed them carefully on the counter, then looked up at the children. Her lips pulled into that wide, impossible smile. "It's time for lunch." Aaron lunged at the counter, sweeping the plates to the floor. Porcelain shattered, stew splattering across the tile. The stench hit them instantly. Burnt meat, rot, iron. The lunch lady shrieked. The sound wasn't human. It was a wail, a scream of hunger and fury, shaking the walls. Pots fell from their hooks, clanging violently. The freezer door slammed shut, then burst open again with a gust of icy air. Claire grabbed Aaron's hand. "The fire alarm," she shouted over the noise. They ran to the wall near the cafeteria exit. Aaron smashed the glass with the crowbar and yanked the lever down. Screams filled the air, not from the alarm, but from the walls themselves, as if the building was alive. The sprinklers hissed to life, spraying water that sizzled the moment it touched the lunch lady's skin. She shrieked again, steam pouring from her body, her flesh bubbling and sloughing away. Claire and Aaron bolted through the cafeteria, the alarm blaring, water pouring down like rain. Behind them, the lunch lady staggered forward, pieces of her face sliding off to reveal muscle, bone, and something darker underneath. Her voice tore through the chaos, deeper now, layered with countless echoes. "You can't leave. You're mine." The children pushed through the exit doors and spilled into the night air, choking on the damp wind. For a moment, they thought they were safe. Then the windows behind them shattered. The lunch lady's shape writhed in the cafeteria, pressed against the glass, her face splitting wide into a cavernous maw lined with teeth too long, too sharp. The building groaned, as if the school itself bent to her hunger. And then, silence. The fire trucks arrived minutes later, sirens wailing. Teachers and parents crowded the parking lot, demanding answers, searching for their children. The cafeteria smoked, sprinklers still hissing. But when firefighters forced their way inside, the kitchen was empty. No buckets, no freezer, no masks, no lunch lady, nothing. Claire and Aaron were taken home, shaken, trembling, unable to explain what they'd seen. The adults didn't believe them. How could they? But that night, as Claire lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she heard it again. The humming. Low, soft, from the hallway outside her room. Her door creaked open, and a voice whispered, close enough to brush her ear, "Finish your plate." The next morning, Aaron's bed was empty. His parents said he must have run away. But Claire knew better. She knew he hadn't run. He'd been taken. And when she sat alone in the cafeteria weeks later, tray trembling in her hands, the lunch lady returned. Her apron was clean, her smile stretched wide. And for the first time, Claire noticed what she was serving. Not stew, not potatoes. Something small, something pale. A hand. Because at Westbridge Middle School, the truth was simple. The children weren't fed. The children were the food.